There are new aftershocks in that seismic jolt to the world's economy. China, an economic superpower, is retaliating against the United States, and that has accelerated the sell-off on the stock markets. On social media today, U.S. President Donald Trump stated that U.S. policies will, quote, never change as he tried to reassure investors.
It's to be expected where this is a patient that was very sick. It was a sick patient that went through an operation on Liberation Day. And it's going to be a booming country, a very booming country. It's going to be amazing, actually.
Now that's President Trump on Air Force One speaking after the New York Stock Exchange suffered its biggest losses since the pandemic. And earlier today, Beijing announced a 34% tariff on all U.S. goods. Those are additional tariffs that will take effect next week in retaliation for the 54% U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports. If you're confused, it's okay. A lot of us are. It's difficult to keep track of this. Now, the top U.S. exports to China include farm products like soybeans, wheat, and corn. China targeted U.S. soybeans in a trade war during Trump's first administration. Now, that forced his administration to pay out more than $20 billion in aid to U.S. farmers. And yesterday, Canada announced its own retaliatory tariffs on autos. So, to try and sort all of this out for us is our business correspondent, Scott Peterson. He's with me in studio now. I wish you all could see how furiously Scott is writing notes down. There's numbers jotted all over the papers. One of the numbers, many of the numbers you're watching is on the markets, right? It was bad yesterday. How's it looking today? It's
not looking any better today. To use Donald Trump's analogy about a sick patient, it's still, the monitors are still crying out that this patient is very sick indeed. We're seeing the Dow Jones open up substantially to the downside. And Natasha, it gets beyond the idea of telling any numbers behind this story. This is a seismic shift that these markets are going through. Dow Jones right now, 1,200 points to the downside. And this follows the worst plunge by the Dow just yesterday in 5 years to tell you how much these markets are yelling out in pain. Take a look at the TSX as well. Also its biggest plunge yesterday in about 5 years, 4 or 5 years, and now another 1,000 points to the downside. We have the price of oil melting off today. Take a look at some of these international markets as well to say that this is just not North American pain, but around the world as well. Asian markets are down. European markets are closing down at the same time, anywhere between 2 and 4%, with a German exchange closing down about 4.5%. And I mentioned oil as well, down another $5 a barrel this morning. It was down 6% yesterday. We're down at 4-year lows for the price of oil. And this means if the economy is slowing, and this is what the markets are worried about, a so-called stagflation where we have rising inflation with all the tariffs, and yet a slowing economy, there would be less need to consume oil. Here's one analyst, Jim Cramer on CNBC, talking about how really Wall Street was following Donald Trump to a certain degree, but when they looked at the tariff announcement itself, said in Jim Cramer's words that it was Bush League.
Over and over again, the president said, listen, it's going to be reciprocal. So you do it, we do it. And that was going to be so good. And I really believed in it. And I feel like a sucker tonight because I am not a free trader and I do not believe in free trade. And I was just as tough, if not tougher than his people, but they screwed it up.
So Bloomberg economic surveys shows that about $3 trillion of U.S. Imports are set to have an average increase of about 23%, and that's before the retaliation by China. So if that's the case, that's passed on directly to the consumers, and so there's this big trouble. J.P. Morgan saying that there's a 60% now chance of a global recession as a result of all these tariffs.
Oh, yeah. Okay, a lot more pain to come. Let's talk about these new tariffs coming in to the Canadian auto sector and also the impact it's having on Canadian employment. What are you seeing?
Yeah, already in the month of March, we saw the biggest job loss in the Canadian economy going back in 3 years. 33,000 positions were lost in the Canadian economy. Our unemployment rate ticked up to 6.7%. And what this shows is even just the threat back in March of the tariffs hitting up was enough to suppress the market. Business likes certainty, and there's not a lot of certainty right now. And so we're seeing potentially a lot of hiring being done by the U.S., not necessarily by Canada, and get ready for more of those ugly numbers going forward at the same time.
Okay, thanks so much, Scott.
Thanks, Tasha.
Okay, we were talking about so much happening in Washington. Why don't we go there and see our friend Katie Nicholson, who's joining us now. So, Katie, Donald Trump has downplayed the huge losses on the world stock market. He said it's temporary pain, long-term gain. But he's had much more to say, as have the newspapers that are responding to the story, covering the story. What are you seeing?
Yeah, you know, tough to be in the White House press office right now and have to combat these types of headlines that we're seeing. So Wall Street Journal, stocks suffer steepest slide since 2020. All those sort of downward strokes, lots of red. Onslaught of tariff ripples across the globe from the Washington Post. Tariff shock waves circle the globe, New York Times, and those plunging things go all the way down to sort of the bottom half of the paper there. And we got the Financial Times, world reels from Trump trade shock. So those are the headlines. And now for the mixed messaging. Are these permanent tariffs or negotiating tactic? And it really depends on who you ask and when you ask them. I just think about how Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, right out of the gate, was saying, don't retaliate, take a breath, think about your own trade policies instead. And then last night, the president himself on Air Force One on the way down to Mar-a-Lago, really speaking of these tariffs in the vein of a negotiating tactic. Here's a little bit of Donald Trump right there.
Those tariffs have come in and every country's called us. That's the beauty of what we do. We put ourselves in the driver's seat.
Are you open to deals with these countries if they're calling you?
Well, it depends. If somebody said that we're going to give you something that's so phenomenal, as long as they're giving us something that's good, the tariffs give us great power to negotiate. Always have. I've used them very well in the first administration, as you saw, but now we're taking it to a whole new level because it's a worldwide situation.
It really is. And at the same time, you have the White House press secretary saying that this is not a negotiation, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick saying that these tariffs are here to stay, and that, frankly, he doesn't see a world in which other countries are going to be able to make enough shifts or changes to strike a deal. So all of this mixed messaging just making it so extraordinarily difficult for global markets, for businesses and countries to get their heads around a response. And in the face of all this mounting worldwide anger, Donald Trump himself this morning posting on his social media, we'll pull this one up first, to the many investors coming into the United States and investing massive amounts of money. My policies will never change. This is a great time to get rich, richer than ever before. Posting that just before the markets, as well as this TikTok that suggests that all of the market chaos is part of an ingenious plan, that he's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. And then you've got the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, in Brussels today, also downplaying the market downturn, really saying that they will adjust, and even saying that it isn't even fair to suggest that economies are crashing. So that's the line that he's sort of pushing in Europe right now.
Katie, those last set of remarks from Trump about being open to the right kind of deal on tariffs, that might have caught some lawmakers by surprise, might have caught them off guard. What are you hearing from Capitol Hill?
Yeah, and there's been lots of lawmakers, Republican lawmakers, who have sort of signaled that they're uncomfortable. Some who have actually, voted, put sort of pedal to the metal there and sort of put their teeth behind some legislation, or at least a resolution. There is pushback in the Senate, but really the messaging from what I would call the tariff true believers is consistent. They're sticking with this, and they are saying believe in President Trump. Here's Republican Chuck Edwards from North Carolina on Power and Politics with David Cochran yesterday. Just have a little listen as he's defending the plan. And he's doing this interview just as the stock market has basically shed trillions of dollars.
Oh, I understand there's a lot of speculation out there, a few skeptics, but let's give this a chance. The president made his announcement just yesterday. There's plenty of time for us to pull up to the table, have some dialogue.
Okay, so again, there's someone who is suggesting this is a negotiation, but what we've heard from a former trade representative under President Obama is that tariffs, once they're introduced, they're very hard to walk back. And Democrats, of course, pouring cold water all over the notion that this is going to somehow usher in a new era of manufacturing in America. So here's a little bit of Senator Chris Coons from Delaware on Power and Politics yesterday.
Big companies that invest in major manufacturing plants don't make decisions on a whimsical path of slapping on tariffs, pulling them back, putting on tariffs, pulling them back. Most major companies will look at this moment with Donald Trump and question whether these tariffs will really stay in place all that long. It takes years to plan, to invest in buying the site, to build the new facility. I'm not sure we're going to see a significant increase in manufacturing as a result of these tariffs.
And Natasha, I just want to point out this. I've got a little bit of breaking news here for you. Fox News had this story earlier today suggesting that California Governor Newsom was going to try and strike deals, partnerships outside of this tariff structure with other countries. And indeed, there is a release now from his office basically saying Governor Newsom directs state to pursue strategic relationships with international trading partners and urges exemptions of California-made products from tariffs. In the statement, it's basically saying California is not Washington, D.C. Basically, just to break down here, as President Trump's tariffs take effect, Governor Gavin Newsom is pursuing new strategic partnerships with international trading partners and calling for California-made products to be excluded from any retaliatory measures and affirming California's longstanding commitment to fair, open, and mutually beneficial global trade. So that is another interesting development we'll be following throughout the day for you.
Absolutely. Well, Catherine, Katie, you were good enough to send us the press release, and he's really going after it. I mean, the video says Donald Trump does not represent all Americans. He's going on to say that California is the home of most Fortune 500 companies. The most AI companies are based in California, like really making a case for California as an independent market space that could work independent of whatever the United States is doing. Really fascinating times we're living in. Thank you so much for that breaking information. Our Katie Nicholson in Washington, and we will be back in just a moment.